you want to get into a little bit of your writing process, maybe on this book, but then how it has it changed at all as you've gone into other ones, or?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the reason I don't outline is because it really bores me, and it's interesting because I was just watching a video of someone that was like, you must outline, like here's a template to do it, and yeah, fair enough, it does work for some people, but genuinely, I feel like if I've written down everything that happens in the story, then I'm like, okay, great, like that's just I don't really want to write it now. I find it really interesting having a vague idea that develops as you write it, and you'll have characters that pop in that suddenly make sense, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, great, this is what's happening. It's because the thing is, when you're writing like that, your brain must have something going on in the background, like that understands, that's kind of almost a couple of steps ahead of you, that because as you're writing it comes out, right? So it's not just off the cuff, there's something going on in your brain. And I find that, especially if I get stuck and then go away, do something else, and then brain is ticking over and the idea and will come to me, and I'll be like, okay, great, I can move that forward. What's interesting though is my first book being part of a series, I kind of, when I signed with a small press publisher, they asked me to do an outline for the second and third book. So I was like, oh crap, like I can't get away with this. So I did have to kind of sit down and think about where the story was going. And to be fair, I guess when you are writing a series, you do have to do it more to that extent, because otherwise you can just find yourself like down a hole. Like, bless him, George R. R. Martin is clearly at that point because his series just like got way ahead, like just massive, and he's trying to wrap it all up.
Now he can't seem to finish it because it's just, well, how do you fix it, kind of a thing.
It's too big. So I think it's worthwhile when you're writing a series having that kind of. The thing that I wrote was basically like a big synopsis for books 2 and 3. So it's I'm not saying they're completely rigid and things won't change, but I think it's helpful having an idea actually of where the books are going. But book 1 was just completely written, I would just sit down and write and not really know where it was going. I guess also with it being the first book in a series, you can not know exactly where things are going, because you can just leave it on a cliffhanger and it's like, well, I'll solve that in book 2. Which I think does annoy some readers. But I don't mind it myself if a book has unresolved stuff. So I guess I don't really have much of a technique, or I didn't have when I was writing this one. It was just had a lot of free time and wrote as much as I could, and the story kind of told itself. I don't know how helpful that is to other people. Because
no, I think it's good. There's a lot in there of like, when I've asked people this question, you get a lot of things from like, do you outline? Do you not outline? I talked to someone who does mysteries. I've talked to people who do fantasy, and it's like, I think it just depends on who you are. One, everyone's brain kind of works a little differently. Some people are more analytical. Some people just kind of want to go with it. Like, it just depends. I think it also matters on the type of book. Like you're saying, like, I agree with you. I think if you're writing like that first book in a series, you can definitely just go for it. But probably the further out you go, like for instance, George R. R. Martin, he probably, like, having it more of an outline as you go might have helped. And maybe he did, who knows? But like, I think, like the longer the series, probably you end up outlining more because you have more threads to figure out and all that. But at the same time, it could also be more of like if you're just doing one shots where it's kind of like, it's a series, but it's also kind of like villain of the week kind of a thing, maybe you don't have to outline as much. So, I think it doesn't really matter. I think it just, whatever works for what you're trying to do, I think it just depends,
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm currently querying a completely separate book, which is like a dark fantasy that had a murder mystery element to it. So that I had to know who the killer was, obviously. Although I have heard people that just go into it not knowing and then just kind of get to a point where they're like, oh, I need to work out who this is now. I did know going in, and so that was again complete different standalone. I did do a little bit more planning on that. And when I say planning, I think I've got a notebook somewhere that's kind of got some random scenes that might have popped into my head, a little bit of backstory on each of the characters, and then that feels like enough. But yeah, I think it depends on the type of story you're telling, but also the type of writer you are as well, because some people just want to have that, chapter by chapter outline. Yeah, and it's whatever works for you ultimately, isn't it?